Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Diane, for that introduction. My name is Nthabiseng Ogude, and I'm the Dean at the Mamelodi campus of the University of Pretoria. And as Diane has already indicated, I'm presenting today with two of my colleagues. Kgadi Mathabathe is the head of community-based research and postgraduate studies, and Philokuhle Majozi is our data analytics administrator. Both my colleagues, you may be interested to know, that actually started their careers in extended curriculum programs. So for them, what they do is actually their lived experience. I also want to acknowledge, I think I saw Professor Norman Duncan. I don't know whether he's in the room. I want to acknowledge him as our DVC, if he's here. Our work in the Mamelodi campus, if I can just give a brief introduction, is on broadening educational pathways. And traditionally, we've done that, broadening pathways into STEM and economic and management sciences degrees or careers. And that has been done through the extended curriculum programs. And in using data analytics, to ensure that we're effective in this, developing these pathways, we work with education innovation, and we have Dolph here and John Claude, and I want to acknowledge them, for that. The bulk of our work, however, in the Mamelodi campus has increasingly been in the, extending data analytics to the pre-university space. And we are funded in that regard by the Kresge Foundation, and we have an American partner, Rutgers University, Newark. So Professor Duncan, I just want to say I did acknowledge you in your absence. Okay, let's go on to the presentation. I'll talk briefly about the background on why we need a contextualized referral system, which we call an MRS. And then Kgadi will talk about the policy we've developed and how to apply it. Philokuhle will talk about data analytics. He will actually demonstrate, and I'll come back and talk about the implications for teaching and learning and for strategic planning. Now, just to paint a picture, extended curriculum programs are more or less a gateway or a pathway if you wish to STEM. And for us, in our minds, this is very different from a student who comes into the university and is on a pathway within a desired program. So some of the students are not in the desired program. The programs are resource intensive, the teaching model is resource intensive, and we would like to think of our students not just transferring, to the Hatfield campus, to their third semester or whatever it is, but we would like to see them as transferring with effective progression, whereas a usual student is progressing while continuing within their desired program. So I think by now most students at Mamelodi campus know that I'm not very enthused by students getting 50%. So we try to instill a philosophy where we say you have to aim for at least 60% because the transfer criteria actually demand much more than 50%. So these programs, and I think now I'm talking nationally, they are flagship, they are high stakes, they have high expectations. They are also a space for incubation of innovative teaching and learning practices, and that's because of the small numbers. And in some ways, if you wish, they're actually a proxy of whether we can actually succeed in developing a 4-year degree across the sector. Now, students are excluded after the June exams. If you fail 3 modules, you go. They must pass all the modules and they cannot repeat the year. Now, Within this context, we're looking at the utility of Blackboard Predict, and Kgadi will talk about that. We have also looked at, how intensively we have to manage, the students. Every assessment counts. But what is important is that we've also contextualized the terms, and I'll just pick two here. For example, progression is usually from semester to semester, but in our case, we think it's assessment to assessment. High impact modules are often characterized in a particular way. For us, all the modules are high impact, and we believe we have dropouts with potential rather than dropouts. So I'm going to quickly, I'm not going to look at this diagram, but I'm going to say one word about it. The evolution of the system is actually from a data, a data-centric approach to a more human-centric approach, and I'm going to illustrate it. What we're required to do in terms of our performance indicators is that the module pass rate should be 85%, and that is good. If you look at this graph, even those that fall below, this is already, still 80%. But what are the implications of this? Even those students 85% pass, we made a rough rudimentary calculation to say that if the pass rate is 85%, in 2016, 90 students would have failed, and cumulatively over the 3 years, 323 students would have failed, and if you calculate per FTE, you will have lost about 16 million. So the 85%, though a good indicator, is actually unsatisfactory. So we go granular. This is module X. We now want to know, it's not about whether 85% of the students actually pass, it's how they pass. So we want to know who got less than 50 and so on. So the focus now is on the students rather than the module. I'll move faster. Level 3, we now said we want to catch the students that are getting 30% and flag them quite early. Before these were not flagged, and we want to say, should you rather think of an alternative pathway? So I will, by the time we reach this level, we are now looking at a much more nuanced approach, which doesn't look at the module pass rate only, high and low performing students, and advising students based on pathways. I'm now going to hand over to Kgadi to talk about the pathways.
Okay, so as Prof. Ogude has explained, Mamelodi campus is a home for extended curriculum programs in the commercial subjects and also in the STEM subjects. So for the commercial subjects, students aim to get into various programs, BCom Econometrics, BCom Economics, and your general BCom degrees and BA Admin. These students have to pass specific modules within their stream. However, those who do not make it, we still see as dropouts with potential, and we make provision for engaging them in discussions about alternative career pathways or even alternative pathways at different institutions of higher learning. Now, for the STEM route, students wish to eventually get into the engineering, health sciences, natural and agricultural science degrees, and veterinary sciences. You will see that courses or programs such as medicine and veterinary sciences, these are very competitive programs that students compete to get a place in. So students have to pass also specific modules within the stream. And you will see later on that our system actually categorizes students according to the streams, with the view of getting them successful transition into the specific programs. And those, again, that do not make it are also given the opportunity to think about alternative pathways into TVET colleges or universities of technology. So I think Prof has said more than enough about the stakes, that these are high stakes. And as a result, we then go beyond the criteria in terms of scores stipulated by the faculties to ensure that successful transition into, especially into the competitive programs. And we also had to then configure a system around factors such as program-specific modules, and promoting that culture of excellence and working beyond just a pass of 50. So all students in this, as a result, are given, in addition to the generic support, a more nuanced student advising in the form of individual student advising or group sessions. So what informs our system is this referral system, the policy. So as Prof explained, previously students were not categorized. So now they're categorized according to their performance levels or risk levels. It depends on how you want to see it. So students who get 75% or more in their assessments, continuous assessments, these students are viewed as well-performing students, but we want to keep that going and to support them even more to exceed the levels of performance to ensure that successful transition into the degrees of choice. So these students are often very small groups of students, and it's possible for us to offer them individual support in addition to the generic support. Students between 60 and 74 also have the potential to, with the necessary support, also get into the more competitive programs. And although because they're a larger group, we offer them the support in groups and in groups workshops. And it's important to note that the destination is not just the competitive programs for all students. Some of our students are actually potential Golden Key and postgraduate students, given the necessary support. So these are just the details in terms of what the distinction between the generic, the individual, and the group sessions. If we need more detail on that, I'm happy to take questions at the end of the presentation. For the low-performing end of the spectrum, we've got students who often perform between 50 and 59%. Now, these students, this is a large number of students based on the 2018 data that we looked at. And if they maintain this kind of performance, they stand a good chance of getting into into academic programs, although not the competitive programs. And because this is a large group as well, we have designed for them group sessions and workshops to help them in terms of study skills, to make sure that they also transition successfully. Between 40 and 49, these students are in the red zone because they face the possibility of academic exclusion. And therefore, this warrants individual support in addition to the generic support. And at the lower end, less than 40, if these students do not improve with time, eventually they are excluded. But because of the investment in these students in such a program, we don't see them as just dropouts, but as dropouts with potential, and therefore see the need to communicate alternative career pathways or even alternative institutions of higher learning. Again, just the details in terms of what the support entails. Okay, so the MRS, we call this the MISSIS, the Mamelodi Referral System. So we could not come up, to avoid duplication, we had to work with a wonderful system that the University of Pretoria uses, Blackboard, which is ClickUp. It's an online learning management platform. So within ClickUp, Embedded in ClickUp is the data analytics tool, a predictive tool, Blackboard Predict, which is available to faculty student advisors and module coordinators, and can actually identify students at risk in terms of the probability of the students not getting a pass at the end of the year or the semester. Now, this for us is very helpful because it gives us a bird's eye view in terms of the number of students to look out for and offer the necessary support. But we, because of the context of an extended curriculum program, and also the fact that really all students are at risk in this context, we had to then use a more granular approach and then look at the continuous assessment scores in addition to the compulsory semester test scores and the exam. So that way we are able to have an early warning system and intervene in time. But there is a good relationship. We hope that in future, again, this would be a cyclical process where we see a good relationship between the referral system, the Mamelodi referral system, and Blackboard Predict, in that it acts as well as a monitoring tool for the faculty student advisors to monitor the effectiveness of the interventions with time. So this is really an overview of the steps, what the MRS entails. Firstly, the module coordinators capture the marks after the marking of continuous assessments. The marks are captured on ClickUp, and then the data analytics administrator uses the policy to inform the grouping of students in terms of performance levels or risk levels. This is a more data-centric approach. He then generates that report and gives it to the faculty student advisor, who then add the human element to the data. And they would then look at the report and decide what the necessary interventions would be. But this process would never be complete if we do not also consult with the module coordinators, because there may be instances where before we approach the student, we realize based on the analytics that the problem might actually be with the module and not necessarily the students. So there needs to be that interaction before the interventions are implemented. And then the next thing is to determine, and this kind of interaction happens in our model coordinators meetings. Then the interventions are implemented, and then the faculty student advisors then generate an intermediate report, which serves at the Teaching and Learning Committee with the head of academic programs, where everybody engages with the data and tries to make sense of it. And culminating from that interaction is a report that is now forwarded to the dean, and this is a report that can potentially serve at our interfaculty meetings, where we look at the higher level in terms of what the data is telling us about the support that we're giving to students. Professor Ogude will explain the details of the last report that culminates from this process. So what we're going to show you right now is this is just to give you a timeline that for the first semester is the first 6 months. Students write continuous assessments, small class tests, but common across all the modules within the program is what we call a term test or semester test 1 and semester test 2. And then after semester test 1, we believe that if the students are flagged, then we have the period from April to June to intervene, to have the MRS working, to give the holistic student support so that we can help them to achieve their goals. Right now, my colleague Philokuhle will make a demonstration and show how the data analytics tool could have. We used the 2018 data when we didn't have the misses working. So we're just showing how the data analytics tool could have identified students for the biological sciences stream and how that could have informed the student advising.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you, Dr. Mathabathe. I'll just train through the data analytics part. for the sake of time. So just before I go any further, I just want to again draw attention that this is the part of the data analytics that I'll be talking about now. So there are two aspects that we'll look at today. One is how we use the reference system policy to inform how we identify students who will be grouped based on the localized and the contextualized support. And the second part is basically how the student advisors use the tool when they are advising. So we'll start with the student support system. So as Prof. Ogude mentioned, we work together with our own education innovation. That's Dr. Limens and his team. So they designed this tool some time back. So the tool that was being used was offline and running on Microsoft's Access. So then we had to design an online tool just to make sure that we have data when we need it. And it also saves time as the original tool, but also that it removes a lot of discrepancies on the data. So one of the additions that we added there was the auto complete, which basically picks up the data from our system. So the faculty student advisors do not put on the student numbers, so they basically pick it up from the system just to make sure that the parameters that we use for analytics are accurate. So this side is basically the dashboard that they use to do two things. One is the analytics, and the second one is for reporting. So here at the top, you basically see that they can see how many interventions have been done in the semester, and also they are broken down according to the academic streams. So the discrepancy here, it's because some of the interventions that I was just putting up there were not indicated on which program they fall in. But basically they can use any of the parameters here to actually load the previous interventions, or even use the date here to actually pull out some previous interventions for the sake of reporting. So the second part that we're going to look at now is how we look at their continuous assessment to be able to offer support in time. So I'll just bring you to this menu, this very colorful menu. So it's the blues and the reds. So the blue parameters, these are the ones that pick up the students that fall within a category if they satisfy that criteria based on one or more modules. The red one, it basically means that in all the modules, for example, in the 75% and above, they need to get that mark on that specific assessment per module. So our tool basically looks at it according to the stream, because our approach is basically on the pathways. So we want to offer them support for their desired pathway. So before we look at what's going on here, I just want to bring your attention to the utility of the tool. So the student advisors can be able to download the list based on the criteria. So this is the 90% or more in one or more modules. Also here, there will be information about the student. So that would be the email and the cell phone numbers that they can use to contact the students. And here we've got the average pay assessment. So as Dr. Mathabathe has mentioned before, is that it's very important that we have this average so that we identify if there's a challenge, there are challenges in the modules, so that the students are not misdiagnosed with supports that they shouldn't be getting. So the other extreme that I just want to look at is the students that get less than 30% in one or more modules. So this is a typical example of this student here, where you've got the 83 in calculus, 29 in molecular biology, 60 in physics, and 67 in chemistry. So the molecular biology just flags. So that's why you can actually check if the issues are with the module or they're with the students. So I'll just end here for now, and I'll just ask Dr. Mathabathe to come and wrap up for us.
Okay, so basically looking at the 2018 data, when we did the filters according to the policy stipulations, the criteria and the policy, the students that, the number of students that were identified that were getting more than 75% in one or more of their modules within a stream, in the biological stream, were about 165. Those getting more than 90 in one or more were about 16. Again, back to the point of the number versus what is possible in terms of student advising. It's very important for me to also mention, when I tracked the data and looked at eventually where these students ended up, for me, I was excited to see that the only student at the Mamelodi campus to qualify for the dentistry program actually was flagged in the more than 90 categorization. And about 3 students transferred into medicine. I think there's also more within that same category. Again, I think my colleague has already mentioned about instances where we saw a student getting 91% in calculus, but less than 50% in all other modules. Again, that makes you think, this is within the biological sciences stream. Does this mean the student is misplaced in terms of their career pathway? Should they rather be in mathematical sciences? And again, if you look at the lower end of the spectrum, again, these students are very important to us because they have potential. They've been part of the program since the beginning of the year. And the other thing is they have the potential of lowering the pass scores, so all the more reason to invest in them in terms of support. Again, it might just mean, you have instances where a student gets it less than 30% and makes us really think and interrogate what the issues are around that. So basically, in a nutshell, I want to show, we have demonstrated that in the absence of a referral system, 7% of our students transferred into medicine, 2.11% faced academic exclusion. Now, this demonstrates the potential for increasing the number of successful transition and reducing the number of academic exclusions when the support is there, a data-led approach is followed in terms of student advising. Again, it's very clear that term test 1 is already too late, so we need to work at a granular level. We start with a small class test, we intervene early in time. And that's why in future we want to have a more granular early identification system. Thank you.
I'm going to take 2 seconds on this one. Now, I think previously Kgadi left out this last part here, and I just want to show that we have this cycle after every assessment, and basically my role is to ensure that we collect data every cycle. And if you take, for example, the management of exclusions, by the time we complete this cycle over a period of 1 year, you have data to show exactly what has been happening, and also in terms of academic planning, you can also say how many advisors you actually need, and there are other implications for policy. And here there's continuous information on improving teaching and learning. I'll just end there. I'm sorry we don't have time for questions, but I hope that was useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the UP colleagues. I think we have time for maybe one question. Is there a burning question? Okay, no? Oh yeah, okay, one burning question.
I just have one question for you. How do you manage your data integrity and protection of student data, especially when you're working with multiple teams?
Okay, if I understood you correctly, how we protect. We are actually still looking at, I think the university is in the process of refining the policy on protection of data. We're very sensitive about that. And I think the access rights are very important. So this will not be accessible to everybody. And you can see we have protected the students as much as possible. And even the modules, we've only showed where it's doing well. So module X was not doing that well, we didn't mention it.
Okay, yeah, I think the whole PAPI Act we're all coming to grips with, and we're going to have to work out some kind of unified approach, I think. Thank you very much to the UP team, and all the best with continuing excellent work.